Okay? So, now, here's the thing about all of this stuff that I just said. Let me sit down. Okay, here's the thing. Who knows if it's true? I didn't say it was true. This is just what I think. Okay? Because if we go all the way back to the beginning again, and we uncover relativity, and we examine relativity, we only know one thing by knowing another thing. We know one thing in relationship to another thing. Okay? So, in creation, there is no absolute truth. There's none. Can't be. It defies the laws of relativity. Okay? Things are only true in relationship to something else. The only absolute truth is up here. God. Love. Consciousness. That's absolute truth. As Yogananda said, truth is that which never changes. And that's the only thing that never changes. Although God, in and of itself, because of the nature of God, is constantly changing, and yet never changing. Right? So, when we examine relativity, we notice that hot does not have any inherent value. It is only hot in relationship to something else. Like I said, hot is hot. For example, fire is hot in relationship to an ice cube. But fire is cold in relationship to a star. Right? So, human beings are big in comparison to an ant, small in comparison to a mountain. Right? So, we start to look at that thing, and we say, well, then what's true? And this was my journey. This was how I started. It wasn't a quest for God. I found God because God was the ultimate truth. But my quest was a quest for truth. I was looking to find out what was true and what wasn't. Turns out nothing is true. And you say, well, yeah, it's true. Of course it's true. We know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. That is an absolute truth. Okay, let's examine that. Okay, so 2 plus 2 equals 4. What is 2? 2 is 1 more than 1 and 1 less than 3. 2 has no intrinsic value. 2 only has value in relationship to 1 and 3. 4 only has value in relationship to 3 and 5. Right? So there's no inherent 4-ness. There's no inherent 2-ness. You know it in relationship to something else. So, if I hypnotized you and I told you there is no such thing as the number 4, the number 4 doesn't exist. The numbers go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You will swear up and down that 2 plus 2 equals 5. Because 5 is 1 more than 3 and 1 less than 6. Right? That's a subjective truth. In relativity, everything is subjective. So, if I hypnotized half the world, and I got them to believe that the number 4 didn't exist, now you have half of the universe, or half of the world thinking that 2 plus 2 equals 5, and half of the world thinking 2 plus 2 equals 4. And we start to fight wars over these things. And there's no inherent isness next to it. You say, well, 2 plus 2 is 4 because the math works out. Because all of our equations work if 2 plus 2 equals 4. Okay, that's true. But at one point in time, we didn't know pi was a number. At one point in time, we didn't know 0 was a number. Right? At one point, we didn't have germ theory. We didn't know why people were getting sick in hospitals until we found out what germ theory was. Right? So, we could find out tomorrow. There's certain things that we can't account for. There's certain things that we don't know we don't have answers for in physics or science or whatever. Right? And we could find out tomorrow that there's actually a number between 4 and 5 that we didn't even know about. Like the entire world had been hypnotized and none of us realized that there was this number between 4 and 5 called pineapple, right? And so now we realize that 2 plus 2 equals pineapple, whatever the number is, right? And now more of our math makes sense. And yet just the day before, we were without the knowledge of this number value, pineapple. Most of our math worked. Everything seemed right. We just couldn't explain everything, right? We don't know. Maybe there's a number there we haven't discovered yet. Maybe there's something like germ theory we haven't discovered yet, right? So, we argue over this thing and say that we're right and everybody else is wrong. Okay, let's take another example. Let's take the example of, let's say, an apple is red. Okay, well, is an apple red? Again, it's a subjective truth. It's relative to what the color is. Red, we consider to be the color red, plus the rods and cones in our eyes that give us the sensation of color, right? A fly is going to see an apple very differently. If you're colorblind, you're going to see an apple is gray. So it too is a subjective truth. Because most of us agree that an apple is red, we say an apple is red, but it's not really. It's a subjective reality. And the more you examine reality, the more you notice it's entirely subjective. That there's no absolute truth there. There's only the subjective truth. And the ego is insistent on rightness and wrongness. A couple years ago, marijuana was illegal in Canada. Now it's legal. Right? So is it wrong to smoke weed or not? 5 years ago, it was wrong. Now it's okay. Depending on where you go in geography, or in the world, prostitution is either legal or it's not. What's right, what's wrong? It's all subjective, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shake your ego a little bit. I'm trying to break apart the fabric of the universe so that you realize that there is no rightness or wrongness. And much of what we consider to be happiness is based out of what we see in the world, what we give value to in the world. And when you start to awaken to your true self and you realize that all things are one thing and nothing really exists anyway, there's no truth to anything, much of the reason for our unhappiness and our sadness in society is because of the fact that we put our ego into everything that we do. And we say, this person has wronged me, or this thing that I give value to is what gives me happiness. And that thing doesn't have any inherent thingness. It's what the Buddhists refer to as the inherent emptiness of everything. A table lacks any tableness that is. It's only a collection of parts which we call the table. It is one of the harder concepts in Buddhism to grasp. They say that things are empty of inherent existence, right? If you want to read up on Buddhism, it's a hard concept to grasp. I'm trying to put it into normal words for you, okay? So let's take another example, okay? We look outside, we go into the park, and we say that's a tree, okay? I say, objectively, that is a tree. Every one of us can agree. Even a blind person who can feel the bark of the tree knows that that is a tree, okay? It's possible. There's definitely a thing there that we consider to be a tree, right? But we call it a tree because we look at it or we touch it with our hands, we experience it with our 5 senses. There are people in this world who have experienced what I call cosmic vision or 360-degree vision. People who see the energy flowing around everywhere, okay? Let's take that one step further. So these people who have that ability to see, they're usually pretty weird, and they usually keep to themselves because it's not something they like to talk about in public because everybody thinks they're weird. Okay? So if we take that one step further, and let's say there's an alien species out there, that doesn't see physical matter. They've evolved to the point where they see energy, right? Everything is just more or less dense versions of energy, which is in fact reality. Einstein proved that energy and matter are the same thing, just with a conversion called the speed of light. But if you speak, or if there's an alien species that only speaks in or sees in energy, doesn't really experience physicality, other than the fact that they can walk on something, and that's called a floor. Right? Let's say they look at the same tree. All they see is the energy currents running up and down the tree, right? And going out into the branches. They see just a bunch of energy. That's all it is. It's a denser version of energy than is in the air around it, surrounding it. And they look at that tree and they say that is a level 7 energy source. And then they look at a person and they say that is a level 5 energy source. And then they look at let's say a fish, and they say that's also a level 7 energy source, but that's amplitude 20, and what you call a tree is amplitude 80, right? So to them, a fish and a tree are exactly the same. They're both a level 7 energy source. I don't know, I'm making this stuff up, okay? But we subjectively see a tree and a fish very differently. To an alien species that sees in energy, they're the same thing. They're different magnitudes of the same energy source. So even the tree has no treeness to it. There's no isness that is the tree. There's no isness that is the fish. And you say, well, yeah, but there's a physical tree there that we call a tree, whatever you call it. There's that tree. It exists. It's there. I can put my hands on it. If I punch it, I'm going to break my hand. We can chop it down. We can make firewood out of it. We can heat our houses. Okay. I agree. But there is, let's say you have a dream. You're sleeping. You're in a dream. And you look up and you see the moon. This is an example that I heard from Rick Archer on the Buddha the Gas Pump podcast. It's a very good podcast, by the way. And I don't know if it's Rick Archer's example or if he stole it from somebody else. But so you're in a dream and you look up and you see the moon and you say, "Yep, looks pretty real to me." And then you're like, okay, how do I know that it's real? Well, I can look up and I can see it. And then you take out your dream scientific instruments and you measure the moon. And you say, yep, it exists because I can measure it, I can tell the distance between here and the moon, all that sort of stuff. Right? And then you get 7.5 billion of your dream friends in. And they all they all look up at the moon and they say, yeah, that moon is real. It's clearly real. And then you say, okay, well, let's double check, let's make sure it's real. We can measure the distance. We're all looking at it. Every single one of us is looking at it, and we look up and we see the moon, and it's definitely real. So we build a dream rocket ship. We fly up to the moon. We stand on it, and we go, yep. Seems pretty real to me, right? So then you wake up and you go, holy shit, it was just a dream. And then you go back into your dream and you tell all your 7.5 billion friends, you say, that moon is just a dream. And they all look at you and they say, what do you mean? It's real. We sent a rocket ship up there. We took out our dream scientific instruments and we measured it. It's real. But it isn't until you wake up that you realize that it was all just a dream. I remember at one point, I've gotten very good at remembering my dreams as well. It's one of the things that I learned how to do when I was trying to learn how to leave my body consciously. Okay? And one of the dreams I had, I was testing this to see how real dreams were. And I was walking down a corridor that was lined with windows. And I tapped on the glass and I could hear it go tink, 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 tink. And I was like, yep, feels pretty real to me. And I stomped on the ground, and I reached down, and I knocked on the ground. I was like, seems pretty real to me. Okay? So the dream world can seem very real, but until you wake up, you don't realize that you're dreaming. And this physical world is very much like that. You know, I'm not touching this chair. You are not touching that chair. You are floating 1 angstrom above the chair. You never interact with anything in your life. It's all just a hallucination. It's the electronic field, the negatively charged electrons bumping against each other. They never quite touch. They get very close, but they don't touch. So your experience of this world is nothing more than an illusion. And yet you take it to be real, because we weigh and measure things and we say it's real. Science tells us it's real. But when you wake up to your true self, you realize it's not very real.